In ancient Near Eastern literature, commonly in war texts, you would read exaggeration or hyperbole similar to what you see in Joshua, where we left no survivor. We left alive nothing that breathed. Sometimes, however, in the ancient Near East, you could, military commander could have eked out a victory, but he'd say, "We left alive nothing that breathed." They basically made it. But then they'd use this exaggerated language. "We left alive nothing that breathed. No survivors left." Well, anyone reading that in the ancient Near East would not take that to be literally true. They would see that as kind of stock exaggeration, common in war texts. But it wasn't intended to mislead. This is just how things were. It's sort of like when you win a hockey game, and the Canucks really slaughtered their opponents. Would that were so, right? Yeah, that's just coming through all the way. And wish you guys well. I'm not a hockey fan myself, but pulling for the Canucks here for you guys. But in basketball or whatever, this is commonly used. We annihilated those guys. Well, no one takes that literally. Everyone understands that this is hyperbole or exaggeration. In fact, the very language that is being used of the Canaanites, leave alive nothing that breathes, or utterly destroy them. It's interesting that God uses that very term when he is going to bring judgment on the people of Judah. For example, in Jeremiah 25:9, God says, "I will completely destroy them." Same word that's used for the Canaanites. He's talking about the people of Judah. Through the Babylonians are going to invade, and they're going to take Judah, captive. They're going to take some into exile, but most of the people will remain behind in the land of Judah. But God yet says, "I will utterly destroy them." He says, "I will make them an object of horror and scorn, and everlasting ruin." In fact, in Jeremiah 9:11, he says, "I will lay waste the towns of Judah so that no one can live there." Again, this is exaggeration. This is hyperbole. And that same term that is used for the Canaanites is also used of Judah. But again, we know that there were lots of people from Judah who survived. They were not utterly decimated. And it's interesting, too, that when you read in the book of Joshua, you'll see language, and again, I've given you some notes on this, but we'll just get there when we get there. But I mentioned that the very kind of language that is being used for the Canaanites is being used for the people of Judah, and we see that kind of exaggeration that is common in ancient Near East also being used in the scriptures. And we also read that when there is mention of no survivors, we'll often see on the next page in the scriptures, lots of survivors left. So for example, it looks like, Joshua is talking about they had rest on every side, all their enemies, wiped out, no survivors left. Well, then we read in Judges, which is literally connected to Joshua, and we see that they're Jebusites who could not be driven out. We see lots of people who are still in the land. In fact, even at the end of Joshua, he talks about the nations that remain among you to this day. So he is recognizing that there are lots of people still in the land. In chapter 11, the Anakites, the sons of Anak, were mentioned that they were utterly wiped out. None left. Then we get to chapter 14, and Caleb says, boy, there are lots of Anakites left in the land, in the hill country. So he's going to go, and they're going to do battle and so forth. Well, what's happening? It's interesting. I was on I did a radio debate with an atheist, or for the president of the London Humanist Society, Norman Bachrach. And you can find this on the internet. And Norman Bachrach and I, we were going back and forth on this. He said, if you say that you can't, take the Bible literally when it says we left alive nothing that breathes, then what can you take literally in the Bible? I said, well, why is it that you're taking only one side of the ledger literally, but you're totally ignoring all those survivors that were left? Lots of them. I said, so, it seems like you're not playing fair here. You're saying you need to take this literally, but you're ignoring all those survivors that remain. Lots of people. And I said, you can't have it both ways. I said, if you take both literally, they're going to contradict each other. But I think if you understand what is going on in the ancient Near East, that they used exaggeration and hyperbole, it puts all of these things into proper perspective. So there is no inherent contradiction here. So we have to avoid the misleading statements that are often made about taking the Bible literally. And what we need to do is read the scriptures more carefully, not more superficially, but more carefully, attending to the text in greater detail, so that we'll actually see more clearly what is going on here. And so and just recognizing that there are different types of literature in the scriptures that demand different ways of interpreting. And let me just finish on this with just an example. Historical narrative. The principle for interpreting historical narrative is going to be pretty much diametrically opposed in methodology to how you interpret apocalyptic literature like Revelation 4 through the middle of chapter 22. You basically, in historical narrative, you assume that something is literal unless there are strong reasons for taking it figuratively. When you get to apocalyptic literature, you basically assume that something is symbolic unless there are strong reasons to take it literally. So again, you can't have a one-size-fits-all approach to interpreting Scripture. So beware of that line, do you take the Bible literally? That's not a fair question. Say, no, I take the Bible literarily, taking each genre or type of literature within Scripture on its own. And if you want to read a little bit more on this, I would encourage you to take a look at Douglas Stewart's and Gordon Fee's book, How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth. How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth, which does just that. It goes through the types of literature, the genres of Scripture, and offers helpful guidelines for all of them.